Oh, Maureen. Hi, Maureen. Okay, welcome. We're starting our Empathy Cafe on the XR Extinction Rebellion 10 Principles. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our cafe. And this topic is actually principle number 11. So we're going to be talking about what principle would you add if you could add a principle, or maybe even what principle would you delete if you could delete a principle, or what principle would you perhaps redesign, rename. And I put a link in there for a Google Doc that you can go into, and I'll put it in again. It's you can go in there and add your contact information, as well as you can write any comments in there. It would be great if you would write your principle at some point so we can have a record of that. And so let's get started with just introductions, since we're a smaller group. Just kind of your name, your location, if you're part of XR, what XR group you're in, and what principle would you add if you could add a principle, an XR principle. So I'll start. My name is Edwin Rutch. I'm from the XR Empathy Circle work group, and I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And if I could add an XR principle, it would be about doing empathy circles. It would be that we empathically listen to everyone. We try to support, we try to listen to everyone inside of XR and outside of XR to really try to spread that. It's actually spreading what we're doing here. So I'll just go around and select people. Like Carolina, would you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Karol. I live in Poland. I am member of XR local group, but also global support and empathy team. Thank you.
And if you had an XR principle to add, do you have one?
Not yet.
No. It'll come up in the discussion, hopefully. Great. Anne?
I'm Anne Jordan. I'm in Somerset in England, and I haven't got mine yet.
Okay, great. Anne Gwynia? Sorry.
Gwynia.
Gwynia.
Hi. I'm Anne. I'm from Germany. I'm also doing the XR Germany Twitter, so I'm not totally free and have to do stuff in between, but hopefully I get most of the things. What I sometimes miss, it's in the other things submerged, that people should actively switch into the position of other people to think from their perspective and to get ideas. What kind of barriers do they have in terms of participating in the society fully?
Okay, great, thanks. And I might mention, since you're from Germany, that we're also part of the German Digitales Klima Festival. So I mean, is that where you came from? Is that they listed us? Yeah, so great. I really appreciate that cooperation. They put us on their calendar and on their events. So really appreciate that. In Berlin, right? So it's a 3-day digital, yeah, it's online digital 3-day festival, and there's a link to it in our event Facebook event page. So great. Martha?
Hi, Martha, based in Cork in Ireland, part of Empathy Circles and whatnot, and I'll leave my principles for the end. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we'll get a report back at the end from everyone too, what you came up with. April?
Hi, I'm April. I'm from XR UK Guardianship and Visioning Circle. I've had a long time engaging with these principles, but there's two that I would want to include. And the first one is actually a commitment to have an ongoing engagement with the principles. that they don't just, they're not just a tick box that you say, yeah, I agree with that, and then move on. But there's something that you, maybe a journal, maybe a principles and values journal that you're encouraged to engage with and share with other rebels. And it becomes a source of kind of connection, sharing vulnerabilities and sharing and recording, you know, how you're embodying the principles, how you see others, where the tensions lie. So something that kind of really embraces it as part of a living growth journey within XR. And then a personal, more personal arising one would be that all actions are focused on stopping, on preserving what will sustain us, stopping the destruction of what will sustain us.
Oh, great.
I don't see any point in any other actions.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, Dean?
Mine's sort of one principle, but it has two ways of speaking about it. It's like, I'm Dean from Plymouth. I'm a part of the Plymouth XR Local and Devon Working Group. My principle would be like no climate shaming, and in that principle will be involved leave no one behind. So, thank you.
Thanks. Maureen?
So I'm Maureen from Ireland, Kildare XR, and I haven't come up with the 11th principle yet. Maybe at the end of this meeting.
Yeah, great. You'll have an hour and 45 minutes almost to think about it, talk about it. Bill?
Bill Filler. I'm part of the XR Empathy Circle work group in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area in the US. And I said empathic awareness, which is similar to what Anne Guigna said, which is, in other words, an awareness of others in the group at the same time you're aware of your own feeling.
Great, thanks. Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie from Tewkesbury, Gloucestershire, the UK. I've been thinking about it across the day, but I haven't decided yet. I'm hoping this will help me.
Great. Anne, you'd already done it, so Kirsten?
Yeah. Hi, I'm from Germany, from Aachen, but I haven't figured out another one for me as well. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm more here to discuss the one from the other person, I guess.
Okay, good. Yeah, we'll kind of support each other in that dialogue. Hester, London.
Hi everyone. I'm Hester from London. XR Families. It's one of my main working groups. Yeah, I wasn't prepared, but I've thought of something. It's not like finished or polished, but it's, yeah, what I'm thinking about is to let others be our teachers, or, you know, that everyone has something to teach us.
Okay, great. So everyone being a teacher and learning from others. So thanks, Sarah.
Hi, I'm not part of XR, but I'm wanting to do a collaboration with XR. We have an empathy circle, June 21st. We want to have a conversation on the role of technology and climate justice. We so hope that people will join us from all the different countries. So I have the information on the Google Doc. Please contact me. It'll be June 21st, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Sunday.
And you can put a link to that in the chat box too. Sally?
Hi, I came in a little late, but I'll just go ahead and listen to everyone else.
Okay. Yeah, Gia, J-E-A.
Yeah, it's Gia in a rush. I come from Germany as well, Stuttgart, and I'm working in the XR movement. And movement of movement. So I'm a bit mixed up because I got a message then that it was yesterday this call, but now it's today. But I'm happy that's there. But yeah, I'm working very much as well to that we don't have these great principles, that we implement them as a new foundation for the society, but also that we work on everything what separates us and to overcome this. It's very important.
Bridging separation or bringing people together. Okay, see if things are moving around. Is there anybody I missed? I think we've got have everyone. So yeah, usually with these 10 principles, we've gone through 10 principles, and then we would have a 10-minute presentation. But here we just heard from everyone to get sort of a flavor and a, sort of a little bit of an introduction to what you think the principles are. So we'll be going into the empathy circles using empathic listening process, a structured dialogue. We go for about an hour and 45 minutes in the circles, and just checking who has not seen how to do the empathy circle practice. Just wondering how much we need to. Everybody's familiar. Okay, well, Bill will kind of explain it then, give a little introduction how the process works, and yeah, and you'll also pick it up in the circle too when we do the breakout circles. Bill, do you want to?
Sure. So there are basically 4 roles. There's the speaker, the active listener, the passive listeners, and the facilitators. The speaker, we use a 5-minute time limit. I think we'll go with that today to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. And so the speaker speaks what's on their mind. Tips for the speaker is to pause. Sometimes what you say is very dense, to allow the reflective or the active listener to reflect. The active listener, and this is sort of the tricky part, is to reflect without putting in your own comments, judgments, encouragements, even, would you think, if you think it's positive, asking questions and things like that. It's just to reflect what you feel the experience or what the speaker is saying. And that goes on for about 5 minutes. And then when the speaker is done, the speaker says, I feel fully heard. And then the active listener becomes the speaker, chooses another active listener, and so on and so forth. The passive listeners, their job is to kind of, keep abreast of what's going on. And the facilitator is gifted with this element of power, this timer. That's basically it. And just to know, if your facilitator stops you or corrects you about something, it's not about a criticism of you or your ideas. It's just to try to give you the experience. This is different from a normal conversation, and it takes some adjustment, something. And so we want to give you the circle experience, because we suggest that something else is going on beyond, below the dialogue. Anything to add, Caroline or Edwin?
I just put in a link to a PDF. So if you're just wanting the written instructions for how this works, you can check that too. And you'll pick it up in the circle too. We'll start with whoever's facilitator can be the first listener. Someone can speak to them, and it'll be modeled, the process, the empathic listening process. So I think we're ready to go into the breakout rooms. Carolina, you want to tell us?
Okay. Hello, do you hear me?
Yep,
okay.
I hear you.
So we have 4 breakout rooms. In first breakout room, Edwin facilitating. In the second, Bill. In the third one, Marta. And in the fourth one, Anne Jordan. Is it okay? Katie, you are with Marta, so you can decide if you want to facilitate Katie. You are welcome, okay? So that's it. If everything is okay, I can open the breakout rooms.
Yep, let's go.
Okay. So
Dean, I think Carolina will be joining us in a second.
Yeah. Hi, Edwin. Hi,
Hey.
Dean.
Okay, we could get started then if someone wants to speak to me, or actually everyone here is familiar with the process, so we don't need any, whoever wants to start, select who, yeah, Carolina?
I just want to say that it might happen that I will drop out because I want to support people who have problem with connection. So I might need to join main session. And
as a tech
so,
support tech
yeah,
person
yeah.
today. Yay.
I'm today technical person.
Usually my role. So. Okay, good. Thanks for doing that, taking over that. So who would like to start? And who would like to select? I'll keep time.
Oh, I don't mind beginning.
Okay. Who are you speaking to?
Yeah, okay. This one has taken on a strange
who are you speaking to?
Oh, yeah. Dean, would you like to listen?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, maybe I'm not going to begin that way. Okay. Yeah, I guess I've had a nice long time of engaging with the principles and values, both observing how they are engaged with by other rebels and some very deep connections with the tensions that arise in myself and those close to me who in rich, deep dialogue about principles and values and the tensions. And I've profited from that in thinking about a new one. Yeah.
Okay. You've engaged very deeply with the principles, with people around you. So this has allowed you to think about what the 11th principle could be.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's been my role in Extinction Rebellion, is both observing and giving voice to principles, both within documentation and throughout the movement, at least trying to. I don't know if I've done a very good job of it. I tried.
So you've engaged with the principles both verbally and written, and you've tried to express them to other rebels.
So I'm appreciating the amount of thinking and dialogue that I have had about principles and values, and then bringing that to the idea of an 11th principle of what else would I add. And my conclusion is that I would add a principle that makes the principles and values a practice rather than an ongoing practice, rather than something you just tick and leave. So my 11th principle would say, I make a commitment to engage and embody the principles and values on an ongoing journey with my engagement with Extinction Rebellion, for the length of my engagement with Extinction Rebellion.
So through your deep connection and reflection about the 10 principles, you have come up with your 11th principle, which is that rebels must be committed to actively engaging in reflecting about the principles and pursuing insights whilst they're engaged with XR about the 10 principles.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I wouldn't use the word must, but I understand. But by making it a principle, it's kind of, that's what I would be wanting rebels to consider signing up to alignment with. So that would include that they kept something like a principles and values journal, or a some way of engaging a practice that shows reflection and integration with the principles and values within your journey as a rebel. Something that can be shared.
Okay, so the use of the word must was a little remiss. So what you are envisage is people actually keep a journal and reflect upon the principles on a regular basis, which allows them to then enact the principles in their rebellion.
Interesting. I suppose what I meant was that in journaling or some other creative way of recording their engagement with the principles and values, that would be part of their journey as rebels. Not so much that it would record their engagement with the principles and values alongside engagement with the practicalities of taking action. So it's kind of, how do they show up? How do you embody these principles and values? Or how do the tensions live in you? And these will be very individual. They're not a standard one fits all.
So through these personal journals that are an active embodiment of their rebellion that is personal to them, they engage on a more personal level with the principles and the dynamics that are involved in actions of the principles with others, even though it's a personal reflection for their own rebellion.
I think I'm making it too complicated.
Maybe down to me, actually.
I hope, yeah.
We'll come back around. That was our 6.
Yeah.
I'm making it 6 minutes since we're a smaller group. So we'll come around again if you to clarify.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So is that time up? I didn't get.
That was the time. Yeah, I put 6
Great,
is
lovely.
6 minutes.
Sorry, I didn't see that.
Oh, okay.
I'll make it. I was so intense on listening to what you were saying.
Nobody could see it.
Thank you, Edwin. Yep. Thank you, Dean. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, April. It's I like that. I like that a lot. Carolina, will you be my active listener, please?
Yes, I will try.
I do not like virtue signaling. I do not like people buying credibility. So this is why my principle talks of no climate shaming and leaving no one behind.
If I understand you correctly, you mean that you don't like exposing kind of virtues, and you, if you would like to add principle number 11, it would be no blaming and shaming and not leaving anybody behind. That's what you meant?
Yeah, virtue signaling
Yeah.
is where someone says, oh, I've got this, I'm better than you. So therefore, people can buy things because they're more affluent. Therefore, they can say to others, oh, you haven't got this. Oh, dear, you're not as committed as me.
So you explaining what you, how you understand virtual signaling, and you saying that it's about giving people ranks depending on what they represent, what features they have or not, what kind of skills they represent or not, how much they engage or not, and kind of ranking people using that sort of categories.
Yes, so it's not done on your merit or your commitment. It's done on your affluence, how much money you have. So therefore, you can buy rank by saying, oh, I've got this, this, and this, and you haven't. Oh dear, you're not as committed as me.
So you believe that that sort of ranks, when they depend on money, financial position, you don't accept that. It's something that shouldn't happen in our movement in any way. Is that what
We nearly. Leaving no one behind means those that can't buy stuff should be given help to buy stuff that would enable our principles to be enacted to their fullest potential.
So you believe that those of us who can't afford things, stuff, any stuff, should be supported by others to have that stuff, not left behind.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah. So virtue signaling, no. And shaming others by saying you're not as good as me because you haven't got something that I have is a no-no, should be a no-no.
Okay, so you kind of coming to conclusion that virtue signaling and leaving anybody behind has no place in XR. That's the rule.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel free ahead.
Thank you. Edwin, would you listen to me?
Listening.
That was difficult, Dean. I'm not
Sorry.
sure if I fully understood you, because I can't believe that anybody in our movement value people considering their financial situation. I'm kind of surprised by what you are saying. So, but maybe you have such experience. I'm completely shocked.
So I'm hearing that you're surprised and shocked about what Dean was saying, that he sees people within the movement who do that virtue signaling, and you haven't seen that. And you're also, it sounds like also some wondering if you really understood what he's meaning.
Yeah, because it's so unbelievable for me that I had problem with understanding, because I couldn't believe that something like that might happen in our movement.
So it's like just surprised that that you have difficulty understanding it, because you just can't imagine that that's happening in XR.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at those 10 principles. I have them. They always are above my desk. And I'm thinking about the principle 8, we avoid blaming and shaming. And it's the principle that's negating something. But I have problem with it because it doesn't tell us what constructive to do. I don't know what to do with this principle.
Yes, you're really looking at principle 8, which says we don't blame and shame, and you see that as a negation of blame and shame. And it's not saying, what do we do? So it's a, instead of, you would like something that explains what it is that we do.
I don't feel like I need to add any new principle. I believe that if we would follow those 10 principles fully, we don't need any new principle. That's my feeling. Because they're complementary. I just have problem with some of them, how they are formulate. Formulate.
Yeah, so you feel you're pretty comfortable with the values, I mean the principles and how they sort of hang together, but there are some issues, problems you do have with how they're kind of formulated. For example, blaming and shaming being negative instead of saying specifically what it is that you want.
Yeah, and I'm talking about this 8 principle about blaming and shaming because we have a lot of tensions. I'm in Regenerative Cultures Working Group. And we have a lot of tensions and conflicts we have to deal with. And many of them start with blaming and shaming. And actually, this is the culture we live in, and we actually don't know how to make constructive criticism and how to make short feedback loop and all that stuff that is necessary to create all this regenerative culture that is necessary to create kind of constructive dealing with problems, with difficult situations. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, so you're speaking from your experience being in Regen about all the different conflicts that you see there. And it seems that there's a lot of shaming. The problems start with shaming and blaming, plus it sounds like you're saying the culture is sort of a shame and blame culture. So you're just wondering, how do we really create a constructive, positive sort of process for giving criticism? And you mentioned the short feedback loops. Sounds like some kind of a process you've heard of that tries to do that.
Yeah, it's part of regenerative cultures. But what I mean, I didn't mean that I see a lot of conflicts in Regen group. I mean that Regen group deals with a lot of conflicts that are happening all over the world, and it's very difficult to deal with all of them. We have really conflict circle in a Regen group that deals with them, and I see that we have to learn how to deal with the conflict, and we don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that.
So it's more that not that there's conflict in Regen, but that being in Regen, you're seeing the conflict that's out there, and then there's a circle for dealing with conflict, and they really need sounds like they need more tools or practices for addressing conflict.
No, that's not what I mean.
That's
I
6,
mean,
but
okay, I'm wrapping up. I don't mean that they need more tools. We all need. We all. In every local group, in every working group, between groups, we all need those tools or constructive ways to deal with conflict. So I wouldn't add a new principle. I would rather kind of reshape this tool number 8.
Yeah, so it's not that Regen needs more tools. Like everybody individually is in human beings, we all need better tools for constructive working, constructively. And then at the core, it would be, instead of saying the negation, we don't blame and shame, have a principle, redesign it so it's like saying what it is that we want, because that's where you see as a way of dealing with these conflicts and
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel hard.
Okay, April, Can I speak to you?
Yes, thank you.
So yeah, so here we're talking about the principles. So you always hear, you know, principles and values. And I think one thing with XR, it didn't lay out a set of values, clearly a set of values, I think. So it's, you know, it has 10 principles, but their principles and values are, I see, as different.
I hear that you're defining principles and values as separate things, and that what we have as the 10 are principles rather than principles and values. There's no definition between them. For you, there is.
Yeah, and the principles, I mean, the values, if you look up values, there's, you know, there's hundreds of values. There can be freedom, love, you know, honesty, authenticity, and it's usually like a one-word essence. And so that's that's usually what the values is considered. Like if you look at a company's values list, like we believe in integrity, we believe in, you know, honesty or whatever. And then usually the principles is sort of a one sentence, sort of a how to do it, a practical implementation of it. You know, it's like if I value empathy, you know, empathy is this value, and the implementation is we are willing to dialogue with everyone, empathically dialogue with everyone. So that's like the implementation of that values. So I think it's important to just have these distinctions, you know, for setting all this up.
I hear that you're you would love to see the distinction between values, and looking that up, you kind of you see that as a sort of one-word statement of something that you're tying yourself to being standing for. And then the principles being linked to those values as a kind of sentence exploring how we would, how we're prepared to go about expressing those values.
Yeah, it's kind of like a rule, you know, it has more of a legalese rule aspect to it.
Okay, so I hear that you think that the principle defines more directly how we would go engaging the value.
Yeah, and I had thought a lot about this because I was always interested in values. So I created a website called Humanity Quest, and it had 500 values listed. And the thing I was going to do is do a documentary on each value. So I kind of started, I did something on inspiration, then something on trust. And then I came across empathy, and I thought, wow, empathy is really super important. I'm going to really dedicate myself to this because I saw it as a key thing. So I had done years of work on looking at different values. So I've thought a lot about this topic.
So I'm hearing you share that you this isn't something you've just come to with the looking at Extinction Rebellion's principles and values, but it's something that's been part of a lifelong work for you that in fact brought you to empathy, and that when you explored empathy, you realized this was where you wanted to dedicate your principle, to evolve a principle that really explored how to express empathy.
Yeah, the website I created was called Humanity Quest, and it was sort of like a dashboard for principles. I mean, for values. It had a list of all these values. You could click on a values, and it went out and searched other databases and just brought you all the information about that value. So anyway, I kind of gave up on that project because I came across empathy. So yeah, so I'll just
that when you came across empathy, you got diverted from where your attention was growing a real kind of online exploratory world of exploring values that took you to all different kinds of places. But empathy pulled you into a much deeper dive into that.
Exactly, yeah. And then the other thing is, you know, I look at a culture of empathy. So seeing empathy, you know, is a central value. And what are the underlying values that make up like an empathic culture? And I thought of, like you, I thought of questing. I call it questing. It's sort of this ongoing exploration of, you know, learning, growing, exploring, you know, and I think that's sort of where you were going with what you were talking about. So I really resonated with that it's not like, oh, we have these fixed principles, but there's this attitude of growth and exploration and ideally, you know, documentation and, you know, kind of like putting it out, making it available for others, the learning and growing.
Mm. So I hear another way of exploring this whole culture of empathy you saw as a kind of quest that people would go on exploring empathy and the underlying values of empathy and principles that would feed into that, and that they could then, within this quest, chart their own progress within that journey of growth and expansion.
Yeah, so I really resonated with what I think that's what you were saying. So yeah, something along. So I felt the resonance with that. So, and I feel heard. Thanks.
Thank you. Carolina, would you have the time to hear me?
Yeah.
Is this a moment? Thank you. I really, I was really touched by your confusion, I guess, and the reaction to the negativity encased within we no shaming and blaming, no. And it came to me that I would change that if I had the opportunity now. That I would change that principle to we practice owning our mistakes and building shame resilience.
So you were touched by what I was saying about the principle 8, about blaming and shaming, the negation of blaming and shaming, and about creating constructive principle. And if you could change this principle, you would create the principle that would sound like, you have to repeat that, please.
We practice owning our mistakes and build shame resilience.
We practice owning our mistakes and build a shame resilient culture.
Yeah. Thank you. I recognize everything you said about tensions arising out of how we express when something is rising in conflict within us. It involves a kind of, this we don't have a good practice of short feedback loops and what is asked of us in that principle.
So you're recognizing that we do have problem with tensions that arise, and we don't have good practice of short feedback loops, and we don't know how to do that. You recognize that problem.
Yeah. And I recognize also that what it asks of us in only naming what we're not allowed to do and not pointing a direction into what we do is triggering. It allows us to be in a very vulnerable space because we don't know what to do. If we're not allowed to do this, what are we allowed to do? What do we do?
So you also see that when we have this construction of principle through negation of something, and we don't have a constructive, positive explanation what to do, it actually sets us in very vulnerable situation when we know what we shouldn't do, but we don't know what we actually should do. That's the problem.
Exactly. So now there's two tensions. There's the tension between you and someone or something that's happening, and now there's a tension inside because you don't know what to do. So it all adds to the level of anxiety and the build towards conflict.
So you see, like, it multiplies kind of attention and between us, and because first we have this tension about something, the slowly arising conflict, and then we have another tension in us because we don't know what to do, how to deal with this conflict. We only know what we shouldn't do, and so the tension, it's kind of synergetic. I lost myself a little bit, sorry, but it kind of multiplies the tension.
Yeah, exactly. And in my personal journey with the principles, I was first engaged with how to grow a conflict system, a way of meeting conflicts within the movement that would step out of how the ways that are generally currently dealt with in organizational form.
So your first stage, when you were first phase of your engagement in movement, you were focused on creating conflict dealing system, and you were interested in created a system of dealing with conflicts that is different from what we know from present life, present other organization culture, organizational culture. We know something new, create something new.
Thank you, Carol. I appreciate the listening. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Dean, would you listen to me?
With pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, what you said, April, was interesting. I didn't realize that there is, to the tension that already is there, the rising conflict, we add another tension that we don't know what to do, how to react. I didn't realize that. That's very interesting. I stopped.
So principle 8 creates more tension rather than giving us ways of getting away from the tension. It's called positive feedback.
I'm not sure if I said that.
You're probably correct. I think I projected onto that one. I do apologize.
I just said that that I'm kind of focused on what April said. That I didn't notice this phenomenon, that not knowing what to do is actually another tension that is added to the conflict that already arrived. I didn't realize that. That's very interesting. And I think that the way this principle should work with other principles, this principle should work together with principle about regenerative cultures, because it's not enough to know how to make feedback, but if I don't feel comfortable and safe of doing feedback because I want to say something to somebody who is much more powerful than I am, I will not feel comfortable to say that. So we need to create, not only know how to do feedback, which I don't know really, but also to create culture in which I feel brave enough to do that. And if I do that in good way, I will not harm anybody through my feedback, because the feedback has to be safe for me as a giver and for receiver of my feedback as well. We both need to feel comfortable with the feedback and safe. I stopped there because it was a lot.
We need to develop a regenerative cultural principle with Principle 8, so that we remove the tension from us speaking to those in positions of authority above us, so that we can speak in a way that is not confrontational and enables both of us to hear what each other is saying.
So I also realized that it's about the principle about mitigating for power as well. So yeah, I'm coming to the conclusion that all those principles are complementary. I would just do something with this principle 8. So as April said, that it also only builds another level of tension when we know what we shouldn't do, but we don't know what we actually can do.
So all the principles interlocked well, but Principle 8 seems to leave the opportunity for more tension to arise, because we don't know exactly what to do, but we know what not to do. So this can create another layer of tension in a tense situation.
Yeah. Thank you, Dean. I feel heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Edwin.
Listening.
Well, this is going to places I didn't expect it to go. This is always lovely. This is why I love coming to these places. This is why empathy is so important, and the skill of actively listening. So I thought I'd built it in with my leave no one behind principle. Obviously, I failed to think deeply enough about how we could actually enact leaving no one behind. But the principle of leaving no one behind means we bring everyone with us. We don't say, oh, you don't work with us, so therefore we're going to leave you to one side. We say, okay, you don't currently understand us, so therefore we need to educate or open ourselves up to your way of thinking, so that therefore we can communicate so you can understand what we're saying.
Okay, well, let me see. So he began with that you're always surprised, like where this goes, the empathy circles go, the discussion goes, maybe a little surprised, like it's gone in a different direction that you would have imagined. And then you're coming back to the principle that you were talking about previously of leave no one behind, which means is you bring everyone along. And if someone's kind of falling behind, you kind of go back and really try to include them and hear where they are and try to educate them. And so there's sort of this attitude of connection and togetherness, or maybe.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly it. And I hadn't thought about the double jeopardy in Principle 8, but there is this double jeopardy, and telling us what not to do is a good start, but we need to be also advised of what's the right thing to do. But then who gets to decide what the right thing to do is?
Yes, you're building on what Carolina and April were talking about in terms of what is the thing that we should do. It's like, it's good to point out what you shouldn't do, but then you need to point out what you should do, but then you're kind of wondering like, well, who decides what is the right thing to do? kind of opens up another avenue of questions.
Well, this comes back to what you were saying about the difference between principles and values. So it's a principle, number 8, but it doesn't, I mean, the value invoked in principle 8 in my mind is you don't have the right to pull someone down just because they're not doing what you say.
Mm-hmm. So you think there's an underlying value under principle 8, which is you can't pull somebody down. I think there was another piece to it, not pull people down.
Just because they don't agree with what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. So you don't just pull people down because they don't agree with what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So you actually, no shaming and blaming literally means you've got to look at yourself before you judge others, because people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. We've got to make sure we're not in a glass house.
Mm-hmm. So kind of the biblical thing, look at the beam in your own eye before you look at the speck in someone else's.
That's what Principle 8 invoked in me when I first came across it. But this double jeopardy thing is a truth. I do find myself going to do things and then realizing, oh, I can't do that because I shouldn't blame and shame. I think, oh, I wasn't aware that I shouldn't be acting that way because that way is negative. I think XR is about positivity and about love and adding, not taking away. So I think it's a good principle, but this double jeopardy in it is a real dilemma for most people.
So you're really seeing the double jeopardy part of the blaming and shaming, because it doesn't say positively. I mean, you have 2 levels of stress that come up, and you're seeing that you're kind of like trapped in that.
Personally, no, but I can see how other people can get trapped in that.
Yeah.
Personally, I like this principle a lot. To me, it speaks a lot of truth, because we shouldn't name and shame, because none of us are saints. We all have feet of clay. So I like Principle 8, but I can see the tension that Principle 8 could invoke.
Okay, so you're really understanding the tension that others might see it, because you really resonate with it, because you realize you don't blame and shame because you realize you have your own faults too. So you're not going to be throwing stones in a glass house for that reason.
So this I'm going to go back to this no climate shaming part of the principle I came up with. It was you've got to put things in principles into small sentences, and the principle of no climate shaming is basically you shouldn't be able to say to someone else, or you can't do what I can do, therefore you're not as good as me. But then maybe that's because I've got that sort of confrontational mindset that I think that way, and maybe most other people don't think that way, because I was really surprised at how upset Carolina was, and I would never want to offend someone that way. And this is what the Empathy Cafe is teaching me: is it's good to talk and listen, not just think you understand everything, because we don't.
So you're just seeing the benefits of talking and listening and really understanding someone else for just kind of sense of clarity, and ourselves. Really listen to ourselves. What do we really mean by what we're saying?
Yes, thank you, Edmund. I feel fully heard.
Oh, great, thanks. Carolina?
Yeah.
So let's see. So for me, the principle that I had wanted to add was we support an empathic dialogue among ourselves and between everyone in the world. So it's actually what it is that we're doing right here is what I support as a principle.
So you would like to add a principle about the building and supporting culture of empathy and building relations of empathy between us and between us and the rest of the world.
Yeah, and the rest of the world between each other. So it's that mutuality again, right? It's the the value, that's one of the values I see of a culture of empathy, is that mutuality. It's like everyone is sort of called on to take part in this, has a responsibility or something.
So you adding also culture of empathy, empathic relationships between different people around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about kind of learning that, and you mentioned that this is actually what we do here.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you want to promote, and you believe it should be another principle.
Yeah, and the means are the end. So we're actually doing the means, which is the end. So I like the idea of the means are the end. And, you know, I've heard Gloria Steinem talk about that. You can't, you know, get rid of hierarchy and, you know, violence with more hierarchy and violence. The means are the ends, and the means are the ends that we get. So we're kind of doing what it is I think, you know, we need to be doing for the ends we want.
So you like this this idea that
the means are the end.
Yeah, yeah, the means are the ends, and ends and means should be coherent. You can't fight violence and hierarchy with violence and hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Don't create something new.
Yeah, exactly. And then coming to the shaming, you know, you're saying like, well, what's the, you know, what's the positive thing that you're supposed to do? And the work of Brene Brown was all about shaming. I mean, her whole stuff, she made her name by studying shaming. And her conclusion was, is empathy is the thing that transforms shame. It's like she has a metaphor of, if you put empathy into a petri dish of shame, it kind of it gets rid of it. So it can't survive. A petri dish, you know, which is I don't know what is it, where they create bacteria and stuff. And if it's a petri dish of shame and you put empathy in it, the shame can't survive.
So you like what Brené Brown was saying about empathy. She was working on shame a lot. She did a lot of stuff about shame, and she said that actually the thing that protects us or save us from shaming is empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And you use this metaphor about dish, that when you have dish full of shame, when you add empathy, it kind of annihilate the shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's her metaphor. She came up with it.
She came.
Mm-hmm.
Brené Brown came with
Yeah.
this metaphor.
And she's got a whole bunch of quotes, you know, great quotes about the relationship of shame and empathy, you know, so it's a good source for it is the positive antidote. It's the thing that you're talking about, right? It's like, what is a positive thing you do is you listen to people about whatever it is that's going on for them, even if they're ashamed to show it. When they're able to share it and get it out, it really heals it. You know, it's a healing quality.
So you believe that empathy is really, well, you mentioned that Brené Brown has a lot of great quotations about shame and empathy. And you truly believe that when we empathically listen to the other person, we give space to this person, shaming disappear.
Yeah, and the other thing is this it's like anti-racism, anti-hate, anti-patriarchy, anti-colonialism, anti-KKK, anti-Trump, anti-sexism, anti-. It's like a whole culture of anti-ism. And I don't know, it seems like there's almost like an addiction to the shaming and it's almost like, it's almost like a cultural addiction. And I think we need to get people addicted to empathy. So it's the feeling of empathy.
So you're noticing that we live in a whole culture of anti-isms,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a culture of negation. And you would prefer if we, instead of finding new anti-something ism, you would prefer to build culture of empathyism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have to step away for a second. I'll be back.
Okay. April, would you listen to me?
It would be a pleasure, Carol.
So I will check time. We're going for 6 minutes, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm wondering, what is the relation of empathy to power? Because when we talk about this principle about not blaming and shaming, and when we talk about culture of short feedback loops, and when we believe that in a culture of empathy, shaming disappear, how all that relates to the power, to the rank.
You're wondering about the relationship between empathy and power, and in relation to this particular principle is the difficulties of speaking up to power if they're directly in short feedback loops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tension and great difficulty for many people.
So suppose we add a principle about empathy. We have principle about not blaming and shaming. We have principle about regenerative culture. And I would add principle about mitigating for power, what to do with that, how to relate those principles. So we start working constructively. I don't know how to do that, but that's the problem.
So I thought that I heard you saying that maybe empathy was the link between these principles, this mitigating power, the no blaming and the short feedback loops.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I believe that this is very difficult to be empathic to power. That's the problem.
Okay, it's very difficult to be empathic to power. And that is a real problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of solution is mitigating our power. But I suppose in truly regenerative, truly resilient culture, we wouldn't have problem with with short feedback loop and sending a feedback loop to somebody powerful, we perceive as powerful person. There would be no such problem, I suppose.
So you think that if we had a fully working, integrated, regenerative cultures we would not have this difficulty of being
Yeah.
able to speak in short feedback loops to power.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's what I'm interested in, to build a regenerative culture in basic SOS, in basic self-organizing system, which I mean every local group, every affinity group, every working group. Inside of them, create a culture that is regenerative. I am part of few working groups, and in some of them I see this regenerative culture working, this culture of empathy working, and in some of them not. And I'm trying to understand what is the difference.
So can I just check that I heard there you interchanged regenerative culture with empathic culture?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that
For me,
you see
they're
those
close.
being
Yeah.
very so close that you could interchange them, and that in working groups that you work in, where there seems to be a working regenerative culture where empathy is flowing, is working on creating connection, you're curious about why that sometimes isn't there
in
other working groups.
Yeah. And I thank you, Edwin. I have also timer. Yeah. So I lost my thought. Oh, I know. I want to just say that. So I believe that we should kind of talk about relations between every principle, between principles. What are relations, how they are intertwined with themselves.
Okay, so I hear that how to explore that might be looking at the relationship between principles and how they interact with each other.
Yeah, thank you. I feel heard.
Thank you, Carol.
And I will leave you for a while because I see some situation in main room.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay. Edwin, would you listen to me? Yeah. Okay, lovely. Okay, so I'm picking up on where I was, and I was talking about tension, and I was talking about how tension can be multiplied. So it occurred to me that there's another multiplication of tension, and that is that I brought in a conflict system that was out with everybody's understanding and practice of how to deal with conflict. Because I'll stop
So
there.
you're really looking, you identified two levels of tension around the blaming and shaming, and that you now have sort of identified even another level of tension, and that has to do with something around how to deal with conflict and people not understanding it or something like that?
Yes, so I looked outside the normal routes for organizations to deal with conflict. And I was introduced to Dominic Barter. To Dominic Barter, Nikki Kashtan, a whole host of ideas that suggested there was a different way of dealing with conflict that looked at it as being owned by the whole community and not between two people. And that was just not recognized by people who came from a normal system structured background. That was really hard to understand.
Okay, so when you were setting up sort of a conflict resolution process, you looked outside the typical processes for conflict resolution. You looked to Dominic Barter, Restorative Circles, and Mickey Kashtan and NVC and the work that she does. and that you're finding that it's sort of outside of people's understanding, and it created some sort of a tension because it's outside of people's normal kind of experience.
In retrospect, of course, I see that now. My reach was in my embodied understanding of these toxic systems we've been conditioned under, and I wanted to reach out of these toxic systems and find a new way to deal with it. However, the place I was doing it was the place already with the most tension. So I'm owning my what might have been a mistake, but I've got another justification.
Okay, so here's a model I'm seeing, that we have a toxic system. There's certain ways of resolving conflict. You looked outside of the system, sort of stepped outside to find another way that wasn't within the system. But that in itself created tension between the system itself and the process that's outside. And so you're sort of kind of wanting to, you think, oh, maybe I made a mistake, or.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So I'm then listening to Caro talk about when you're dealing with tensions and conflicts, one of the most important things is being comfortable and safe.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so you're just building on what you heard Caro say about, to deal with conflict, you need to have a feeling of safety.
And our current culture treats tension as an unwanted emotion, feeling, experience.
So typically people try to avoid tension and see it as a negative quality.
I have to take a deep breath to say this. The truth of the future that we are stepping into, that we are already knee-deep in, is there is no comfort and safety to be had. The comforts we've been sold as comforts were based on an illusion they were based on an illusion, because what they were really based on was the exploitation of other people and the extraction of the natural world. They were never safe, and they were never comfortable, and everything we think of as safe and comfortable isn't.
So you feel some real grief. I'm hearing some real grief around the culture. What it thinks is comfort and safety is not really comfortable and safety, because it's built on the exploitation of others. And so it's sort of like this false illusion of comfort. And there's a deep grief around perhaps people who are suffering under that because of that.
Yeah, there's no perhaps, really, as we wake up to the truth of it. There's no perhaps. Everything we label comfortable and safe was built on other people's lack of comfort and safety and the exploitation of the natural world. It is a construct of the system to think that we are safe and comfortable. And it will never be fully present in our lives again as we wake up to the truth of it.
So this whole idea of this, what we have, the culture, is based on safety and comfort. It's an illusion, and that illusion is going away, and we're never going to be able to get back to it. And also just sounds like the grief of just seeing how people have been harmed by it, and
the natural world.
and the natural world as well. Yeah, the people, the natural world, the world has suffered. There's a lot of suffering.
Yeah. Are we at time? And then
yeah,
Dean spoke to. Okay, I guess.
Yeah, you'll come around. Yeah, okay. And you feel the grief. Yeah, Dean.
Yeah, thank you.
Are you there, Dean, or you're? Or you're. Yeah, What I've been thinking of is holding a series of empathy cafes on empathizing with racism, empathizing with power, empathizing with hate. So yeah, so maybe, yeah, if I just start with that.
You want to bring the empathy circle practice to help resolve hate and racism.
Yeah, it's like empathizing with racism would be one circle.
Empathizing with racism would be one circle.
And I do see that you're also very feeling a lot of grief and tearful. I noticed that. Seems like you were very moved by what April said. You want to just
You've
reflect that
noticed
part?
how moved I was by what April said.
And seems like a deep grief that I'm sort of sensing. Yeah, so I'm kind of aware of it. Yeah, but don't, yeah, it's, yeah, I'm trying to get a sense of it. I don't feel as moved by the grief as both of you are.
Okay. You can see the emotion, but you're not resonating with that emotion. You can't see, or maybe I'm projecting here, you can't see why we're so emotional about what we've just been talking about.
Yeah, it's not emotional, it's more feeling such grief. I don't like the word emotional because I think we're emotional all the time. It's more like the grief. It's like, you know, specifically the grief.
We're emotional beings, and you can see that the expression of grief is happening.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word emotional. I would just mention that I didn't use that word emotional. I think I didn't.
You didn't use the word emotional. You think you didn't use the word emotional.
But what seems to come to mind is I've seen, you know, with like a friend when I have an awareness of having harmed them and not even knowing that I somehow harmed them. I see how the impact of what I did, you know, really hurt, you know, how they were really impacted and I wasn't sensitive to it. And I know that that for me, that can be just a huge amount of, I've had the experience where it's just like a huge amount of grief just to say, oh, I had this impact on you and I didn't realize, you know, that this was the impact that it had on, where I really just feel the impact from them. So that's sort of what's arising for me around this.
Sometimes when you say something to someone else, you are not always aware of how it can affect them personally. And when you see their reaction, it's not a pleasant feeling.
Yeah, it's like when I really sense like, oh, this had that impact on them and this is the pain that they're feeling from it. It's like, I feel, oh, I feel like a sense of grief, you know, a sense of loss.
So when you're aware of having that reaction on them, you feel a sense of grief or a sense of loss.
So I'm sort of wondering if that's where April or even you, or if that's, I don't understand. I'm not quite sure I understand. I'm kind of trying to understand the grief that you're both expressing.
currently, you don't understand why we are expressing so much grief. You're not currently aware of why we become so emotionally expressive.
Yeah, of grief, or maybe it's not even grief. Making a guess here. So, yeah, that's my time. I feel fully heard.
April.
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm going to speak to you now so that Edwin can hear, hopefully, why we are so emotional. I believe that we are connected to our mother. We have plundered her, we have abused her, we have raped her, we have tormented her. And we think it's progress.
Yeah, I'm hearing you give voice to the growing awareness of the horrendous treatment of humans to the planet, that your connection to that is as if she was our mother. You see her as a living life force who sustains us as a mother would.
Yes, James Lovelock expressed it well in the Gaia theory. But I also am aware of the exploitation of the people that have occurred through our colonialism and our teaching of a song that is a fallacy and being sold a dream that is a lie. And I am fearful for those that when they awaken from this, what we perceive as a nightmare, but to them as a dream, that they won't be able to cope with the sheer horror of the lie they've been sold.
Oh, and I hear that your awareness of the rising level of awakeness that people are getting present to about the atrocities that are visited, human to human and human to the mother that sustains her. That some of the emotion you're expressing is fear that this will be unable to be met by people as they wake up to it.
Yeah, and we peddle this dream and this illusion, this fallacy as the best thing ever, when in reality it's the worst thing that we've ever managed to put upon the planet as far as I'm concerned. And I'll be very happy when it stops and people do wake up from the nightmare. But I am fearful for their sanity, because the grieving process is very traumatic for some. And emotions are raw when they've never been resolved, because people have always said that, oh, you're a fool, you're just a crusty hippie, when in reality maybe these crusty hippies are actually the human beings and everyone else is the fools and the madmen that dance to the piper's tune that's leading us all over a precipice.
So I hear that that you fear for those who wake up to the level of participation that they have been, that you think they've been tricked into, that they've been led along Pied Piper's path into believing is success, is, you know, is the life of comfort and safety that is promised to them, that is their right, that when they wake up to the level of participation in torture and horror and extractivism that implies, then that you fear for their sanity, for their ability to cope with the rawness of the grief and the fear and the emotions that arise alongside that awakening.
Yeah, thank you, April. I feel fully heard.
Carol, would you listen?
Yeah.
Ooh, because there was another bit. God, I really, do you know what? Sometimes it's in me. Actually, is this? There's a tension about speaking how I see things, because it often makes people cry. It makes me cry, but it often makes other people cry.
So you're talking about the sort of regularity you observe when you're speaking sometimes. It makes you cry, but it also makes other people to cry. And you see that quite often.
Yes, thank you. So there was, Dean made a point earlier about not condemning people or putting them down because they didn't have what we have, and that somehow they should be brought along to our level of having in order for there to be equality. I may have misunderstood that, but that was kind of what I heard.
So you want to refer to what Dean was saying before about not leaving people behind us, but kind of coming back for them and teaching them, helping them to get equal with us.
But when you're fully present to what it really cost for us to get here, there's no bringing others along to this point. The only route to equality is for those of us with this level of comfort and privilege to give it up, to step back from owning and living the way we do.
But you see that it's not about those, so to speak, behind us to keep up with us, to catch up with us, but it's about those who are, it's about us to step back and or to those privileged to step back.
Yeah. Yeah, when I say back, it's not like I mean stepping back in time. I mean applying a level of scrutiny to what we see as comforts and rights about what it truly is costing globally for those to be our everyday resources, for the want of a better word.
So what you mean by stepping back is not literally stepping back in time or whatever. It's about changing the attitude we have now. It's about scrutiny we add to our life, present attitude, with all the sources we have. So in global scale, we don't, as I understand, we don't overuse them. Is that what you mean?
Kind of. It's about like currently our economy is based on financial returns on things, when there should be an economy that we can measure what our privileges truly cost, not just in terms of finance, but in terms of, children down mines, or, that information is available, but only if you look for it. That information is kind of flashed up on your Facebook screen as somewhere to give money to. It's not directly correlated to how you live your life. It's not directly weighed up as something that you can actually choose to step out of.
So what you mean is to not base our economy on criteria of financial criteria, but on the real sources we actually have, and only to the level we actually have, because we change. That's what you mean? Help me if I am not.
Okay, I'm over again. This is giving me such an appreciation for the people who grew these principles. If it were applied to power, for instance, it's power. So you were talking earlier about how do we speak up to power? Well, my ideal would be that there wouldn't be an up power, that power is with. That if you want to speak, so the powerful people actually need to step back from the power that people give them in saying you're a leader, or kowtowing to their opinions.
Mm-hmm.
They need to step back from that. Stop giving their opinions. Stop, directing because they think they know best. But recognize that that stepping down from power is a way of equalizing power. That's a way of mitigating power. It's not just up to everybody else to catch up with them. They have a responsibility, those with you're being given the power, to step back. We have a responsibility with our privilege to step out of the privilege in order to make it possible for equality to happen.
So the whole construct of economy and our social life is that we still try to make people so-called behind us, to make them catch up with the privileged one, when it's actually should happen oppositely. So people with privilege, with power, should step down, should give up their power, their privilege. And this is the only way actually to fulfill our goals in XR, as I understand.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. And
okay.
yet, it might be my opinion that that's the way. Thank you. It might be my opinion but I'm sure it's not XR's opinion.
Okay, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you, Carolina. Oh, thank you, Carol. Yeah.
Okay, it was difficult. Who didn't spoke? Edwin, would you listen to me?
Listening.
That was difficult. Every time I felt that I'm catching what April means, it appeared that actually not exactly what she means.
Yeah, so we found that a difficult reflection because you thought you had it, you thought you really understood, and then it wasn't quite accurate.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry for that.
So feeling some apology for not sort of being able to get it.
But I hope that because it's recorded, so everyone can hear what truly April means.
So some appreciation that we have a recording here that somebody else could kind of watch it and hopefully they'll capture,
Yeah,
they'll
yeah,
understand it.
better than me, Yeah. Yeah, the same thing what Dean said pulled my attention. That we should help those behind us to catch up with us. My reaction was the same. No, we actually should step down or step back. Yeah, and I see Dean appreciation and acceptation for this amendment.
So I'm not sure I quite got that, but that you should not just step back, but you should step down from power and privilege. And the Dean, you see that he's sort of like, acknowledging that too, or supporting it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because well, if I understand correctly, April, I totally agree with that. This is, and totally agree with Dean. It's not the progress, and Dean also said that before. I truly believe it's not the progress what we perceive as progress. It's not. It might be technological progress, but it's not human progress. It's not social progress. Those are two different things. To make technological development and to create progress in society, in culture.
So you're also seeing that society has sort of a technological progress, but that's different from human progress and
or social,
or social human type of
and
progress.
those two things are very often confused. It's a serious mistake. And the other serious mistakes, I actually can't understand how all those great economists all over the world can think that our financial system and our economy based on those fossil fuels is inexhaustible. No, I don't know what word to use, but I mean it might develop and grow all the time. I can't believe, because it's so silly idea for me. How those all great economies can believe that
So
and
really,
base their theory on that. I don't understand that.
Yeah, I just can't really understand like the the famous big economists. How can they just believe in this continuous growth? I guess on a finite planet, finite resources. How can you have this unlimited growth? And they're big, important people, but yet they can't. They come up with these ideas.
For me, this idea is simply silly. It's so silly. How does it happen?
Yeah, it's silly.
Great minds.
Great minds yet have these silly ideas.
Yeah, but maybe this is story about the king and old people pretending that he wears beautiful clothes. Maybe this is something like that.
Yeah, maybe it's like the king has no clothes and everybody says he has it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very happy that I'm in this movement because I'm among people with whom I find sisterhood and brotherhood. And in the time of sorrow, it's very important to be among such people.
Yeah, so there's a real appreciation that you can be part of this movement, because you've got in the current situation, you've got a brotherhood and sisterhood with people, and like a community. I guess it's a feeling of community and support.
Yeah. Yeah. So eventually, whatever will gonna happen, we at least have ourselves.
So you've got each other for whatever the social, political, economic happens. You have community.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel heard.
Okay. Speak to April. Looks like we've got about 9 minutes left.
Okay.
So yeah, I was thinking of the stepping, the privilege and stepping back, and somehow I think I see it sort of differently. I know everybody's saying, "Oh, we've got the power, we have to step back," and I think I see it more in global humanistic, what I would consider humanistic terms.
Okay, I hear that you have been listening to us talking about the sort of power and privilege and how equality might mean stepping back from that, but you have a different viewpoint on that, and that's more based on a global view.
Yeah, I mean, I see the sort of the horrors that happen all around the world for any culture, no matter where it is, sort of economically, the partition of India, the Muslim Indian massacres, Rwanda massacres, the Cambodian massacre, Indonesia, where I lived 2 years, they had anti-communist massacres, anywhere from 600,000 to 1.5 million people killed. My parents were Germans, near the Russian border, so when the Russians came, everyone on my father's side was killed, and the horrors that the Germans did to the Russians as well. So I guess I see this universality of kind of the horrors that people inflict. So I'm not too, in terms of stepping down, is if somebody is better at empathy than me, great, but if they're just, it just because they give someone who hasn't had power is I'm a little skeptical about that.
Interesting. Yeah, I hear. I heard you list an inexhaustible list of, Roger would call it, human fuckeries. Of the horrors that humans inflict on humans over the ages.
Yeah.
You've got lived experience of that within your family line. You're present to the horrors that humans can do on humans, and so it gives you a different viewpoint on power.
Yeah.
And how, and stepping into power is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, and the people just stepping back for the sake, oh, you don't have any power, and they're not using it empathically, so I'm kind of skeptical. So for me, again, I keep coming back to empathy. The empathy is core. Like, if somebody can, do better at creating an empathic environment, great, let's move them forward. But if they're just creating more division, more shaming, more blaming, I don't support it. I'm not gonna, it's like, yeah. So I think it's more nuanced, but around stepping back and privilege and all that. There's underlying values that we're trying to, at least I'm trying to promote. And so I think that, yeah.
And that your experience and kind of lived leadership in sharing empathy and sharing practices that will build empathy within communities and people and individuals is, gives you a more nuanced understanding of what it is to kind of lead people in kind of demonstrating and holding people in that growth process, and that you wouldn't want to be stepping back to somebody who's not got some of those understandings and nuances and practices in place.
Yeah, if they're not out there actually trying to promote connection, understanding, empathy, it's kind of like saying, oh, I will step back. I mean, there's plenty of people in this fourth demand issue. They will not come into an empathy circle. It's like they will not come in. And it's like I say, here, let's have a dialogue about this fourth demand with justice, etc. And let's talk about it. And it's like, no, we're not going to talk about it. We're right, and we don't need to talk about it. So, I mean, I have concerns about that. You know, it's like, if you're not willing to talk about it, how can you be trusted with whatever it is that you're trying to promote?
So I hear that your practice of building empathy through dialogue processes have really expanded your appreciation of talking about things and the connection that builds in creating empathy, even through the internet,
right.
Which has really surprised me. I would have been all for empathy sorry.
Okay, sorry. And before my time is up, I do want to get one. So what I really love about XR is the direct social action, but the action for me is trying to bring those people in power into a dialogue. So I would love to do an occupation of the Parliament Square or whatever, or the Capitol Mall in Washington, D.C., and we demand an empathic dialogue between the different parties. And sort of, I would love to get, Trump and Nancy Pelosi into an empathy circle. So, I think that's how, in terms of mitigating for power, is everybody's got to have a voice. Trump's got to have his 5 minutes, but, he's got to empathize with other people. So I really see that what we're doing here is we're stepping back. In fact, I'm going over my time a little bit. We're stepping back you're listening to me. You are stepping back right now instead of in forms of promoting whatever ideas, and you're listening to me, and it feels good, and I think that's what we need more of.
Yeah. So I hear your vision of an empathy action that gets the leadership, the global leaders, into empathic connection, stepping back, listening to each other, listening to people with different lived experiences, and building some empathy for each other's lived experience, and that would have a significant shift in how the world was.
Yeah. And it's you're doing it. You yourself, April, are doing it. You are stepping back and listening and empathizing with me. So I think right now you're doing that stepping back process. So.
Okay, thank you. And I'm doing that in participating in it. I'm stepping back from my gabbing all the time and making everybody listen to me and crying, and by listening to you, and not just listening, but listening with the kind of ears that are interpreting and showing and reflecting it back in a way that shows I've understood.
Exactly. So we're kind of living it. So thank you very much. Really appreciate this. And so we're going back to the main room.
Yes.
So, yeah,
thank you very much. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Caro.
Thank you, Caro. Thank you, April. Thank you, Adrian.
Okay. Hopefully, is everybody back?
I think so.
Okay, I lost a few people.
It should be 16 people. Now we are all back.
Okay, great. Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. See some smiles. So I hope you had a good discussion, some good empathy. And what we want to do now is go around and just hear from everyone. Take a minute, or you can even a little bit longer to share back. Like how was that experience? What came up for you, and especially if you were able to come up with another principle or sort of a redesign of one of the existing principles, or just whatever is alive for you, just to report back. So I guess, see, I just go across the window here. Anne, Gwynia, so would you be wanting to go first?
I can do. I had so many things. I couldn't be here at 100% because I had to do a shitstorm trooping while being in the discussion. We had several things. We were focusing mostly on how do we actually make this transition happen, this huge scale of evolvement of our society, of our economy, and how fast does it have to go, and that it at the same time takes a lot of patience and openness to connect with everyone and to bring us on the same level of awareness. Yeah, we haven't really discussed it in detail, but I think this awareness and this connection and this building a network was something that was with us all.
Okay, thank you. Martha, do you feel ready, or do you need a minute to collect after? You're muted. Okay, well, you're still muted. Come back to you. Then Katie, would you want to go?
Yeah, it was very interesting. Haven't really come up with a principle myself yet, but I'm processing it or thinking about it. But I think the two things that I think really stuck with me were, one, putting the plural into culture in the word regenerative cultures, and putting the plural in things generally within XR. That I think is really important. And the other thing is the importance of soil came up, and actually I think that's massive, and I don't think it's talked about enough. Our soil is dying at a dramatic rate, and actually that's really important to me. So those two things kind of sat in my head, but there was so much stuff. I'd be here all night, but yeah, it was a great discussion. So thank you very much to my group.
Thanks. April?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there was tears flowed in ours, and I welcome and I'm deeply grateful for the tears. I'm still pretty convinced that engagement with the principles and values is a journey. They're not set pieces that you can just pin to the wall and say, I got that one, because our engagement with them changes as we learn and grow. And for me, that principle that says you're committed to an ongoing journey of engagement with the principles would be essential. The biggest, I think, awareness that I've come to in talking about them this whole 11 weeks has been about my gratitude to Gail and Stu, who mainly were the two who came up with these principles. The difficulty in sitting down and working out wording for what you meant, and getting clarity that people would understand. Just, it must have been so difficult. Fortunately, they only had 12, 18 people to check it with. Whereas now, you want to make a change, you've got hundreds of thousands of people all over the globe that want to have their input in a change. It's a different story now, but yeah, my gratitude to Gail and Stu for having put in the perspiration and perseverance to come up with these principles and values and think they might be worth something.
Great, thanks, April. And thanks for having sort of inspired this series too. It was your sort of inspiration to to hold this series. And I think we're really doing the quest or the search or the exploration that you're talking about. And I might just add, after this series is over, we're going to be doing the demands. Then we're going to restart the series with the Australian, Oceania, Asia, Europe time. So that'll be another series coming up. So it'll continue. So Bill, yep.
The first is I always am really appreciative when people in the circle whose first language is not English share. And I just feel so, you know, I feel touched by that. I really am touched by the effort to do that. And so that really affects me. We've totally rewritten, no, I'm only kidding. We didn't rewrite. This is an exploration. And what happened is in our group is not so much focus. Well, we did talk about the principles, but really got into the weeds as to our personal experiences dealing with these issues. And so, how do we see these principles in relation to what's happening in society? A very stimulating and heartfelt talk. So, thank you to my group.
Thanks, Bill. Marta, you want to go?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think it was mentioned the regenerative cultures piece. I think that's important and non-controversial, I think, by this moment in time we got there. And then although I like we are a nonviolent network, I'd like to have something there about active nonviolence. Whether we practice nonviolence or I don't know. For me, nonviolence is not something that happens, it's something we make. And it's not just in the actions, it's in the way we speak, in the way we embody our everything. So maybe if it was a commitment that was written into the principles, it'd be easier to rally around and they have together daily practices of nonviolence. And then the last piece I'll share, well, there's also the thing about radical acceptance. So we're all broken wholes. And we say we welcome everyone, every part of everyone, but maybe it could be more explicit, you know, this imperfection of not just the system, but it's the beauty of us is that we are all broken. And so the last thing is about the deep adaptation. I think there might be a way where XR could be more explicit in accepting to lapse. Because it's happening, even if it's not happening right here, right now, in our side of the world, it's happening. And so it feels for me very often a bit dishonest, not being so clear that we are vulnerable and it's happening. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Anne Jordan, you're muted.
It was interesting. We talked about, for me, like keywords were there about compassion, being alongside one another, like traveling with, my language isn't good, but with passion and understanding and developing more understanding of each other and of all the life around us, and hearts. And we talk quite a lot about community and doing that in small groups wherever we are, and they need to be quite local, and through strengthening those communities that will make the change for what's coming, and a focus on what sustains us: food, water, just basic things of life and each other and our relationship to one another and acceptance of one another. I haven't got a principle all nicely written up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thanks. Kirsten?
Yeah. I felt the exchange was really emotional and enriching for me. We didn't talk a lot about the principles, But in the last weeks, I often had contact with other people from XR which were not from Germany, but it's only on a level where you don't talk this intimate and on such a personal level. I got a good sense about that we all share the same the same needs and the same emotions, but partially we are living in really different systems. And I really enjoyed the different facets of XR and the people within it. I'm really grateful for being here.
Thank you. Sarah?
I also want to say how impressed I am when people join the conversation where English isn't the first language from other countries. Also, what really stood out for me, I mean, that conversation was really deep and profound, and it did drop to, you know, it clarified a lot. There was a lot of discussion about hoping to turn crises into opportunities. And there was clarification regarding political and environmental issues that are at a crisis point. And a lot of explorations of, there was a lot of shared commonalities. And I'm really thankful for the people in the group. It was a really great discussion.
Okay, and also wanted to mention that you're wanting to hold an empathy circle, and you're wanting to invite some people from XR to take part, and you could put the link to the event. You're looking just for a couple of people from XR to take part.
Yes, so yes, we have, so if Bill will be hosting it. It'll be next Sunday, June 21st at 10 a.m. I put the information on. Please email me. And I can also put my email, I can give a second email in the chat box of, hold on right now, I will do that. This is my personal email. I gave you my work email. So please email me. We really want to have some people from XR on a conversation regarding the role of technology and climate change and ecological justice. And this is extremely relevant, especially since due to contact tracing, and other issues. So we want to have this conversation with an environmental group called Stop 5G International with XR, and both people who are pro 5G and people who are against 5G are welcome.
So they can just email you and get information. If for the end, if you post that Facebook link for the event, I think that will be an easy.
Right now in the chat.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna have to go online. So when I get off, am I the last person?
No, we have more people, so I want to get onto them too. But
so
we've got another 5 or 10 minutes. We'll be here.
Okay, great. I'll go online right now. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Thanks for that. So Sally?
We had a pretty interesting group with lots of ideas of an 11th principle. I explored truth and just basically having an upward spiral method as an approach, and non-fear-based. And then there was discussions of food and the importance of food and water, and Truth for the People is a group that was formed 4 months ago by Hester that looked brilliant and kind of summarizes a lot of it. So, thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Hester?
Hi, yeah, I felt very excited at the end of our talk. We almost got a principle, I think, that had something to do with passion or compassion. Yeah, in my mind, it's like passion for community. And then we talked about a lot of different things. We talked about the micro revolution that you can have by taking control of your food. There's so much that disempowers us, but actually we can make all of those choices count. And I'll put the link to the Trust the People project that Sally mentioned, because this is what I've been working on with the Future Democracy Hub, and it really it's trying to find those solutions, the gentler way. It's not about direct action anymore, and we said something about that, like maybe the time for demands has passed, and the resilient community is the one that's going to survive this next part of the crisis. So I also feel what Marta's saying. The deep adaptation work has to take place because the resilience is what's needed for the situation as it worsens. Yeah, so I'm going to put the Trust the People link. The website's not launched, it just has like a holding page.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yeah,
Thank you,
put the link
everybody.
in. Yeah, thank you. Maureen?
Yes, well, it was a very interesting conversation that we had. And I suppose what kind of is coming across to us as I'm in XR for 1 year. Well, if XR is to thrive now, the people, because it's not a hierarchical movement, it's a movement in a way, it can only be sustained through passion and through compassion for the earth, and through having a heart for for the land and for the earth and the soil. And so it is a global movement, and it's also a micro movement. And I've seen in that year the creation of community around. It actually creates community. And it even, for example, these Zoom calls we have been having for the last 11 weeks has, in a sense, created a community online, an online community. It has. And in a world which is so fragmented, we do need this, we need to feel not alone, not to feel alone, but to feel sustained by many others who have the same goal and to have the same passion. And I think that we have a very serious opposition too in big business that we are trying to that we are coming up against. And very often we do make revolutions against our local governments, but often they're powerless at times. So our struggle has to be at the macro level and the micro level. And I feel that at the micro level, from our own back gardens and our own food and our own community, we can be sustained when the global action might sometimes be discouraging. And when members of XR, which I've heard can be suffering from burnout, having a patch of garden is a very good, or having something growing, can be a way of feeling, now I'm actually part of the revolution. Even if they beat me off the streets. And if I have a companion, a colleague in prison, I can always visit her or him with a bunch of herbs and some local food, which I have grown to revive his or her heart.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope empathy circles are part of that too. So,
thank you.
Yeah, for building that community. Thank you, Maureen. Dean?
Wow, that was not easy. there was so much emotion, when there were so many wonderful ways of looking at things. We looked at the way the words were chosen. We came to the conclusion that sometimes the words create tensions that we weren't aware of before. My words were open to being interpreted to a way that I wasn't aware of. So scrap all my words, less is more. We need to have an empathic, regenerative culture, and we need to have active reflection upon the principles on a daily basis, because quite frankly, they're not set in stone. We're not set in stone. Hopefully things can grow and we can stop thinking that we know all the answers, because answers are relative to each individual. So yeah, it was wonderful. Looking forward to the next one. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dean. Yeah, appreciate been very regular in these calls, so appreciate that. Enjoy your presence. Carolina, would you?
Yeah, I was in the circle with April, Dean, and you, Edwin. We were building upon each other in our circle and develop ideas. And most of that was already said by April, Dean, and you. I would add only that it is important. Well, what sticks with me, it is important not just trying to develop a new principle, but maybe more talk about relations between all the principles, how they are connected to each other, how they are complementary, and how they support each other. Because it looked for me from our discussion that we can't take one principle and separate from others. They are all connected. And they work well only when we see them in connection to others' principles. That's the beauty of those 10 principles, actually, I think. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Carolina. And Gia, J-E-A?
Yeah, Gia.
Gia.
Well, I'm a bit exhausted to bring this together, what we had in our group. But, well, we did reflect about it. It was very much that we become like, the agreement is that we go to the very low level back to seeds and to become a caterpillar, kind of that we reduce our lifestyles and yeah, and that we recreate and redesign this world, that we become a new world, that we work on a new world as well. Yeah. Yeah, I can't think too much. Maybe later on I reflect as I remember these all things, but it was great. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, thanks. Yeah, I feel the same way. It's like there was so much, how do you really share back all the richness? So that was my experience too. But if you know me, whatever the topic is, I connect it back to empathy. So my principle, my principle was we support empathic dialogue among ourselves and between everyone in the world. So we're sort of doing the principle here. And, all kinds of different things came up about, shaming and blaming and how that was it's a sort of a negation. It says, don't do this. And what do you actually do? And then I say, well, empathy, Brene Brown talks about empathy being the antidote to shame, right? So, I make the point about the inverse of shaming and blaming is an empathic, presence, listening to people, dialoguing and doing exactly what we're doing. There was an issue of searching, this ongoing growth that April talks about. And I think that's really what we're doing in these cafes is sort of there's no final answer. It's just an ongoing search and an ongoing quest around these topics. There was something about power, stepping back from power and privilege. And for me, the relationship was with empathy was I don't want to step back for people who are not being empathic. I want to bring forward people who are promoting empathic connection and dialogue. And so that's how I kind of connected it there. And yeah, and also for how do we deal with conflict. It was an issue of conflict. And again, when people dialogue with each other and hear each other. So that was sort of my take on it. And so, yeah, so that's our time is up. So I really appreciate everyone taking part in this. I just always enjoy this so much. And we're up for next week. We'll be having our next Empathy Cafe. This time we'll be going through the 3 demands, demand 1, 2, and 3. I mean, each next 3 meetings. And then the 4th will be, week will be on, should there be a 4th demand? And so, and then we'll be starting the whole series again for another time for Australia, Asia, Africa, times Europe. So I think that's it. Anything else that am I forgetting? Oh, empathy training. We're doing an empathy circle facilitator training, and I don't have that link right now. I should have prepared that. I'll put it in taking part in the training. We're setting up training cohorts, so we hope you take part. Having taken part in several of these empathy circles, you're already doing the first step for the training. So we hope that you join us in those trainings. So, and if you stick by, I'm going to put that link to the sign up real quick for the training. Here, and that's you can go to that Empathy Circle for Facilitator training, sign up, click on that, and it'll start you on the path to becoming a facilitator. And hopefully in future cafes, you'll become able to help facilitate some of the breakout empathy circles. So that's it for me. Anything else, Carolina? Thank you, Carolina, for doing the tech support. And anything else, Bill, Carolina, Martha, or you want to add? And if you would like to stay, if you're a facilitator, if you could stay for afterwards, we'll just do a short debrief. So thank you, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, April.